To anyone who is a survivor of any sort of assault or abuse, please check the show notes prior to continuing this podcast episode. Uh, this is going to be triggering for a lot of people, and I want to make sure to at least give you the space to be able to decide whether or not you want to listen to this podcast episode. Last week's episode was with Dr. Lex Brown James, and we talked a lot about how black bodies are over sexualized, and we talked about how sexual trauma and what the healing process may look like is extremely different for marginalized communities, and we talked in detail about how it affects black women. And this podcast was it came as a result of us having that conversation. So I'm very thankful to our guest Z, who felt comfortable enough to reach out and share her own experience. So I'm not going to give too much away. We're going to go ahead and get into it right away. So if you haven't already, please like, rate, review, share the podcast, Something Positive for Positive People, with those who need it. It's a nonprofit 501c3, so if you want to donate to helping provide support to people who need it, and this whole fundraising process has been very challenging because Something Positive for Positive People branches into so many areas that it's not very specific to one area. So getting funding has been a bit challenging, but we did get approved to attend STD Engage, which is what I put together a survey for. You might have taken it already, but just figuring out what negative emotions you experienced after your positive diagnosis, if you're someone who has a positive STI diagnosis. And then the other thing was just expressing how Something Positive for Positive People has helped you. So thanks to those responses, I got the registration fee waived, which was almost $800. Um, and I'm gonna go out to Alexandria, Virginia in November. So this is exciting because I get to get with a network of people who are in this space who can help uplift and provide some level of support for Something Positive for Positive People, enabling us to continue doing what we're doing. Also, special shout out to Waxo, longtime supporter of the Something Positive for Positive People podcast. Healthcare is all over the news right now, and not just because of the Democratic primaries. A couple of weeks ago, John Oliver and Wanda Sykes did a segment on Last Week Tonight about medical bias. Hannah Gadsby's new show has a healthcare tie-in too. Why? Because our system is messed up and people are finally talking about it. Waxo created the awareness campaign hashtag We Need a Button to address the bias and discrimination LGBTQ people face when interacting with the healthcare community. But it extends so much further beyond that. Please check out the content on waxo.com. That's WAXOH.com. And we all know healthcare professionals who are passionate, caring, kind, and who truly care about their patients. We all know those people, whether it's friends, partners, relatives, but somehow our system has made it okay for people to be mistreated. Maybe that's due to the lack of bedside manner and cultural sensitivity training, but the convo needs to happen because too many people have stories. And again, you can check this out by following the hashtag We Need a Button, or you can go to waxo.com for more information. Last time to check in with you. Please take care of yourself as you listen through this podcast episode. And please read through the show notes and just check to see this may not be something you're ready to listen to, but it's important. And it's important to me. It's important, obviously, to the guests, but we got to get out of this normalized dysfunction. We got to be able to speak up. We've got to be able to create space for people to tell us about mistreatment, and we got to give the language, we got to give the tools, the resources, the education to people so that they can articulate wrongdoings and call out dysfunction. Welcome to Something Positive for Positive People. I'm Courtney Brain. Something Positive for Positive People is a podcast that features the experiences of people living with and or affected by sexually transmitted infections. Our guest is Z, and she's had herpes for 10 years now. I want to make sure to provide people with a trigger warning because we recorded this podcast episode before and it wasn't as structured or neat as we would both have liked it to be. So we're redoing it, and a lot of stuff came up that we didn't necessarily plan for to come up, but it just really went along with the story. This is just something that you want to be mindful of listening through the podcast. If you're someone who is a survivor of sexual assault, this is something that will invoke emotion out of you as you listen to this podcast. Just take care of yourself. All right, Z. So you were diagnosed with herpes at 15 years old.
Correct. I was 15, had my first title boyfriend, and we both went to the same school, and we were having anal sex one night, and I ended up with a split on my anus, and it turned into blisters and bumps on my vulva. I went to the doctor, and she looked at it visually and said, "That's herpes. Yep, that's herpes." And she did a swab and ran the test and everything, and prescribed me that day because she said she knew it was herpes. I went up with my mom and came out devastated, crying, and I just wanted to keep it to myself. So I asked her if we could just keep it between us, and that's what it was.
Did you have any type of education on herpes, or did you know what it was before you contracted it?
No, not really. I would see stuff, hear stuff. Everybody would say, like, you would see, like, cold sores and pimples and stuff on people, and people would make kids and make fun and say, "Oh, that's herpes, you got herpes," stuff like that. And you know that you can't get rid of it. I knew I couldn't get rid of it if I got it, but I didn't know anything about it.
Oh,
For real.
okay. So you just had basically the stigma and
Basic knowledge, yes.
okay.
And the stigmatized knowledge of it, yeah.
Did you get anything from the doctor? Did they give you a pamphlet or some information on how to manage it, or how was your
I think she gave
interaction?
me a little pamphlet
Okay.
with it, but it wasn't much really at all.
When you were diagnosed, what hit you the hardest, especially being 15 years old?
The fact that I have something that I can't get rid of. And then at the time, of course, I'm going through an outbreak. So I'm like, I got these nasty sores and stuff on me. I'm like, what am I going to do from this point? For real, I got my butthole is split. I got these blisters all over me. Like, what the fuck? What am I going to do? So it was a lot, especially at 15.
Hmm. Was this your first interaction with any kind of an STI?
It was not, actually. I want to say I was 12. I was in the eighth grade. I can't take for sure my age. I was in the eighth grade, and as we discussed, I was sexually active very early, and with older gentlemen at the age of 12. I got chlamydia in the eighth grade.
How was that handled? Did you get treated?
Well, so my mom found out, like, I skipped school that day, and at the time I was going to school with my cousins, and she snitched on me. She told them. But when my cousin told her the backstory, or the story I was telling her about why I skipped school, which was that I was with a family member that didn't exist, but my mom immediately took me to the hospital, and they, gave me the medicine at the hospital.
Oh, so were you showing symptoms?
I was showing symptoms, but I, of course, super young, didn't have any idea what was really going on with me. I had discharge and odor and all that, but I had no idea what it was from.
So did you and your mom have a conversation after she took you to the doctor to get treated for this in the eighth grade?
No, not really. It was one of those things. I knew she was disappointed in me, so it was kind of like, yeah, we didn't really talk about it. She immediately got me on birth control, and that was kind of pretty much where we left it.
Yeah, and I don't want you to think that any of the questions that I'm asking you are coming from a place of judgment at all. Obviously, there's a lot there just from you being sexually active so young and the way that your mom handles it and the partners that you had being adults and you at these times were a minor. I want to make sure that you feel safe, and if at any point, you need us to stop this, pause this, cut it off, whatever, just let me know, okay? I'm very concerned with the fact that I guess your mother's priority was for you not to get pregnant. So that's why you were given birth control after you got chlamydia.
Right. Yeah. I don't know how to explain that really at all. I can give a brief background that may help, may not. I don't know. My mom is Muslim and she tried to raise us in Islam and to be Muslim. So I think a lot of that was maybe trying to pretend like it didn't happen and trying to, you know, cover it up and just kind of move forward with it. But I had a cell phone, all this stuff. My dad had got me a cell phone. I got all that stuff confiscated, and I wasn't allowed to talk on the phone and all that kind of stuff. But I can't remember having a conversation about what I was going through and what I was dealing with. It was just kind of like, you know, you skip school to have sex, you know. And of course, I'm not letting her know that these are older guys. I'm not telling her this, but it was just kind of like she's disappointed me for skipping school to have sex, and it wasn't what's going on. Did something happen? All that kind of stuff. It was never like to gain knowledge of what the situation actually was.
And I don't want to make assumptions, but if I'm trying to put perspective to it at all, given the information that I have, it would just be that if we just hide the physical stuff, you can do whatever it is that you can want to do in the dark. So as long as you don't get pregnant, nobody will know that you're doing the things that I don't really approve of, but we're
Mm-hmm.
also not going to talk about these things. So it's
Definitely.
like you do what you want to do, but I'm going to keep from this coming to the light by you getting pregnant at a young age.
Yeah. I actually heard kind of phrases like that a lot, like cover each other, and in Islam we don't reveal our faults and stuff like that. I heard phrases like that a lot, and like what goes on in this house stays in this house type of stuff. You know, I heard that kind of stuff a lot growing up. So there's definitely that type of mindset surrounding it. Like she didn't want me to do it, but it's like I can't control what you do. But as long as I can cover it up as much as I can, we don't have to expose it.
So it's just more of like a shame thing. You said she was disappointed in you, and so there's like this shame there of your mom just really not wanting it to get out the house. So like
Yeah,
whatever happens in this house is gonna stay in this house. But then there's also this added layer to it. Just like when you were diagnosed with herpes at 15, we ain't gonna talk about this. At 12, I don't know that there was anything that she may have been able to say, but certainly it would have been more useful to say something rather than say nothing. And
yeah.
whose idea was it to not talk about it? Was it yours or was it your mom's?
I remember getting yelled at a lot about it. I can't give verbatims about it, but after being yelled at and scolded at about the fact that I was out having sex and skipping school, it just kind of wasn't talked about after that. It was kind of like I reprimanded you, you know, you've been disciplined for it, and now I hope you don't go out and do it again. But it wasn't like I don't want to talk about this anymore, Mom. Can we not talk about it? And she wasn't like, you know, we're not going to talk about this anymore. But generally speaking, a lot of stuff that we had going on at home, I would hear a lot of this don't go outside of the house. This is between us. This is what's going on inside the house.
I think I have like a similar background. Of course, not with the sexuality aspect, but just you don't gossip or tell people things that you hear your mom talking about on the phone, or if they're talking shit about other relatives, that
Yeah,
stays in the house.
yeah,
So for me to see that like this can go as deep as that, as we aren't going to talk at all about this thing that clearly needs to be talked about. And I don't know if it
right.
would have created more of an urgency if she knew that you were having sex with adult men while you were a minor.
Well, and I don't want to throw my mom under the bus. I really don't. This is not intended to throw her under the bus. There were instances where even after that, like I would have guys over, and there were people would call the house, and she walked in on me once with somebody, and then she also picked up the phone and heard a grown man's voice while I was talking to him in another instance. And I would have thought that at some point there should have been some intervention there, some serious intervention there. But there wasn't. It wasn't until I made the decision to run away, or what I thought was running away, that there was an intervention there. And I was committed for 2 weeks
Committed to what?
for
What do you
trying to
mean?
run away. A psychiatric hospital, a psychiatric facility.
Okay.
I was committed for 2 weeks, actually a week inpatient and a week outpatient. And then we went to Marxa and got a therapist. And at that point was when there was supposed to be some intervention behind that. But that was also, I think, what also kind of put some fire under my mom to get me into that, besides me running or trying to run away, was when I came out about something happening to me as a younger child, but, not really letting on about what the truth was. I lied and said something else happened to me. I think that kind of lit a fire under my mom to give me some help at that point.
Now, this thing that you're referencing, was this you being molested at 6 years old?
Yes, yes.
Okay. You told her this because of being admitted to the psych ward? Was this something that they encouraged you to do?
No, I told her prior to this. One of my cousins came out about something happening to her. She was being molested by somebody. Something in me was erupting, I guess, and I felt like I needed to say something, but I did not want to say that this particular person has been doing this to me since I was 6. So I said that something else happened to me, and I didn't say that my cousin's been molesting me. She's been touching on me, doing this, and this, all this stuff. I didn't say that. I don't know. Maybe we got into an argument or something around this same time, and I got upset, and I decided that I was gonna leave. I was gonna run away instead of running away. Like, my dad came and he picked me up and found me, and I'm venting to him, and then all of a sudden I'm being taken to a research. I'm being taken to the psych ward and being committed for a week. Then it was counseling after that. After being forced to take Zoloft and all that stuff. Then it was, you get to talk to a therapist. You get to talk to somebody about your problems.
All right. So there's a lot more here than just the herpes conversation for sure.
Definitely.
And you're seeing a therapist right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
How long you been seeing your therapist?
About 2 years.
Okay. And I'm gonna probably continue to check in with you about this, but you're at a place where you're comfortable with sharing all these experiences, correct?
Yes.
All right. Dealing with the molestation at 6, getting diagnosed with chlamydia at 12, dating adult men that were, what'd you say, 40?
20, 40, somewhere in between, I'm sure. There were multiple guys.
And I'm sure in hindsight you're probably like, what the F? But at
Right.
any point, can you recall figuring that was wrong? I mean, I'm sure nobody knew to tell you, hey, this is not legal. You shouldn't be doing this. And unfortunately, your parents didn't really want to get involved with it. I don't know if they were just turning the other cheek, but that would be the first. I would have imagined that there was some kind of red flags that were going off, and it's just like, it's I want to equate it to like now, where if we see a fight breaking out or if we see some injustice being done, the first thing everybody does is kind of just pull out their phones and like allow it to happen, or think that
Instead of
somebody,
going in.
yeah, or they think that somebody else gonna step in and help, or it's not their place, it's not their job. It feels like, no, you just didn't have anyone tell you, or maybe you didn't feel like you could trust anyone around you to tell you, oh yeah, this is what's going on, and you didn't have anybody to tell you, hey, that's not normal, that's not right.
Right. Well, I believe that it was normal. I didn't think that it was anything wrong with it because, mind you, I grew up in the inner city. I went to schools in the inner city. In middle school, there were girls who were pregnant. There were girls who were getting STDs and getting them, going and getting them taken care of. It was in 8th grade. It was school holes. It was, all kind of stuff going on around me. So that climate was the climate that I grew up in. It was normal, and then it was introduced to me prior to me even having any real knowledge about sex. The cousin that was molesting me, like, when that incident happened at the age of 6, I have no idea what is going on. I just know that my cousin just told me to get down on my knees and lick her vagina. You know what I'm saying? I have no idea what's going on. So by the time I'm becoming sexually active or wanting to become sexually active, I'm thinking that I'm behind because it's around me is so much, it's pregnant girls, walking around me about to have kids in the 8th grade. I knew my mom from a religious standpoint and from what religion taught me and what she taught me about the religion. I knew I was not supposed to have sex until marriage. I knew I would be considered unclean. I might not be able to find a husband. All this stuff. I knew homosexuality was supposed to be wrong. And it was just so much stuff that I had going on in my mind. So I knew that according to the religion, none of this stuff was right. But it was normal because that was the behavior that I was consistently seeing. And it was the behavior that was like, it was embedded in me early.
Just add to what you were saying and just simplify it to being, you were just a product of your environment. So this was normal to you, and nobody came in to say this isn't normal, or I don't know. It's just I wonder what is there to be done. Like we always talk about how a lack of resources in certain communities, they don't help. I mean, not having these resources, not having education, poverty, just a number of things that contribute to teen pregnancies and STD rates, and all of this stuff is a factor. And
Yeah.
what you're sharing with me right now is something that's not, it's there, it's happening, and it's just not getting any kind of attention. There's no sense of urgency.
No, I make jokes sometimes when I discuss this because I've openly discussed it with friends and some of the guys I was with make jokes about me. I should have gotten paid for the stuff that I did. Like I basically lived the life of a child who was sex trafficked, but I was like doing it myself. I basically lived the life of a child prostitute underneath everybody's noses, and I wasn't getting paid for it. I didn't have a pimp type of thing. That's the type of lifestyle that I was living, that I was in. Like I said, I make jokes that I should have got paid for it, but that's the climate. that is what the environment is. It sucks. I remember watching the Surviving R. Kelly documentary, and watching that resonated in me so much because that is literally the mindset that people had. The girls thought it was okay. The girl thought that this was normal. This is how it's supposed to be. Oh, this 20-something-year-old dude is up here, at this McDonald's, at whatever, or outside of the school, whatever, and he looking at you, girl. He got the car. He probably out here selling drugs, got all the dope, got the money, all this stuff. He looking at you. You better get on that type of thing. It was normal from on both ends, and the men didn't think it was anything wrong with it. It's crazy. It's crazy. And I'm sure it's still probably going on today.
When I grew up, I mean, I was fortunate enough to not necessarily, I would say like middle class ish. We had everything we needed. I didn't get a lot of stuff that I wanted growing up, but in school, I remember there were teenage pregnancies, and to me, that was even normal. I didn't know of anyone contracting any STIs. Where people were having sex, but there were condoms. Like we had some kind of a conversation about getting condoms, and I can't even remember really being motivated by sex at all, in middle school. I think that was like a high school thing for me, and
Yeah.
maybe it was because of that wider age range when hormones are raging and the people around you are now talking about sex. But like in middle school, we just wanted to play video games and play football. That
Yeah.
was it. I say all of that to ask you this: were there any other activities for you to be involved in? Any passions at all? Like, what was it that drew you to this kind of lifestyle? On top of it just being your environment, it's like the cool thing to do.
Well, two things. First, like I said, it was introduced to me. I was involved in activities. I was in dance for a long period of time. I don't even remember when I stopped, but I was pretty young, probably like 6, 7 ish, around that same time. I think my mom may have not. She wasn't able to afford the classes at the time, so I had to stop doing that. The other thing was, by the time I started engaging in those specific behaviors, I had already, been experiencing sexual activity and just not knowing what it was. And that particular, like the method I used to get in touch with these guys was introduced to me by my molester. It went from one norm to another. She's been touching on me, doing all this stuff to me, and we've been watching porn and doing all this, all this stuff. And now we're gonna move it up the ante a little bit and move on to the next level. We're gonna start talking to guys. We're gonna start talking to guys together. It was really a smooth transition, and it was a normalized transition. It was like, this is what you're supposed to do. And she told me that somebody she knew, one of our close, supposedly family friends, introduced her to it, and it was just kind of like, it seemed like a rite of passage. Now, at a point, I did get involved. Like, I played volleyball from my freshman year to my senior year, and that was after years of convincing. I played the same for the same team that my brother played for, football. But that was after some years of convincing to get me involved in something. But there was a long period of time where I wasn't involved in anything, and that's when the majority of that was happening.
It went from molestation to the watching porn to now talking to guys. Wasn't this like a chat line or something? Was this something that somebody was getting paid for?
No, it was a chat line. Well, yeah, yeah. So the women weren't supposed to pay, but the guys were supposed to pay
Okay,
on
so
the phone, over the phone. So it was a phone chat line, and that did, they did profit from the line and people meeting on it.
oh, okay. So this is
Yeah.
like a phone dating site. It's not like
Yes.
a sex call line.
No.
Okay.
This is data. This is like one of the data apps you would download on your phone now, but before we had cell phones type deal.
Okay. Got it.
That's the best way I can describe it. It would be like being on Black People Meet on the phone.
Okay. And
Oh.
so you're talking to these guys, and then you're using that and meeting up with these guys as well. Like is anybody asking for ID? Or they not caring about the ID?
And there were probably a handful of guys who asked, for ID and asked how old I really was. There were some guys that were like, okay, no, Shawty, you too young, and just kind of sent me about my way. But majority of them didn't care.
Can I ask you about these guys? Are these like give me an idea. Are these people who are also in this environment where this is the norm? Or are these people who are coming from outside of the community that you were in because they know that this is available to them? So like I'm give you an example. Like, are we talking about like some old rich person who lives like an hour outside of town in the suburbs coming in where they know that this is okay?
No, most of them were people who lived in the same neighborhoods. They were literally a few miles away on the phone type. There was one guy in particular I knew. He had a family, and I remember I was like 16. And I skipped school to go meet up with him, and he took me to his house. And when I got to his house, it was funny. It was bills all over the floor, and all of his family pictures was on the floor. Like, maybe his significant other knew he was doing some shit he ain't had no business doing, and wanted whoever he was with to know it whenever he brought him there. It was crazy, but they were mostly people who were in the same environment and were looking at this stuff as normal behavior. There were some who knew better and you would think would be living a better life, but weren't. Had a secret life.
Did you ever feel like your life was in danger while you were meeting up with these men?
Yes, I did a few times. When I met up with the guy who was in his 40s, that was probably the scariest experience that I ever had. Even during sex, like, I did a lot of the time. Just feel like my life was in danger. But I don't know. I don't know if it was an addiction or what that drew me to continue to do it, but I did.
Did you have any type of fear of consequences if you didn't do what you were doing?
Yeah, especially once I was in their presence, in
Mm-hmm.
some of the guys' presence.
Yeah. So I mean, but there was never really a point where you just felt like, all right, I need to stop doing this. I'm gonna stop doing this. But like, if you ever, I don't know, like it's like you said, it seemed like it was an addiction, but no one was getting paid for anything, so we can't say money was the motivation.
No, and the thing, and that's probably what made them continue to do it. Because I'm sure there were women on there that was charging to have sex with them, but these guys were running across a young, naive female who was willing to do some things, and they didn't have to pay for it.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? So they was jumping on the opportunity.
Did you know anybody your age who was also doing this, or did you know any? So this was really like a normal thing for
Yeah,
friends. Like y'all were doing this.
yeah.
I'm not judging. I'm very curious and interested in like how to help people in this situation because again we don't have the information, we don't have the resources, we don't have, and I mean it sounds like there's not even any accountability. We're talking about grown men with families, we're talking about men, we're talking about adults, we're talking about people like this is just it's seen as normal for the environment.
Yeah, one of the biggest things, the most impactful things that could probably be done is to eliminate secrecy, especially within the homes, because having that as like a underlying thing within the household, it creates at any point that you want to say anything or you feel like you want to express yourself or anything like that, it creates some kind of like barrier around even coming out and saying anything about anything that you're experiencing because you feel like you got to keep everything a secret anyway. And that's a lot of secrecy within the Black community. And it's not just something that was in my own household. I saw it outside of my house. Like, I knew things about people, but they weren't supposed to be talking about stuff. I think that if that factor is eliminated, if people were okay with being open and talking about stuff, we could eliminate a lot of stuff that goes on. If people were okay with talking about the fact that something happened to their child, I think a lot of the times when kids experience stuff like that, the parents feel like it may have been their fault. They sometimes may feel like they put them in a situation that they shouldn't have put them in, or they could feel that shame behind it, and they decide that they want to bury it instead of having to address that and then work from there to heal from it, to heal them and to heal the kid and all that. Eliminating the secrecy, really, and holding these people accountable. Because if you're keeping this stuff a secret, the child never feels comfortable enough to say, well, this person did this to me, this is happening, this is happening. You're also enabling these people to continue to do what they're doing. You know what I'm saying? If you stop that, if you nip it in the bud as soon as possible, one, that person will be held accountable for it. Other people who feel like they can do it will be afraid to do it because this other person that they know or may not know or they heard about has been held accountable as then such and such has happened to them. I think that that's a major part of solving the problem is stopping the secrecy. I understand parents, and as a parent now, I would take that on myself. If anything was ever to happen to my daughter, I am responsible for her emotional health and helping her develop that emotional health. So I'm going to have to do everything that I can to make sure that if she experiences anything like that, I have to do everything that I can to make sure that she can process it and that she can heal from it and all that instead of trying to cover up and hide the shame of it. Because it wasn't her fault. It wasn't my fault. It's the predators. It's nasty men, women, that's doing this stuff to these kids. It's not our fault. It's these people. Maybe it was a lack of judgment on our end, but it's these people that we've allowed our kids to be around.
You're in the system. I don't think that there's any one person to point blame at, especially given that this was just seen as normal for whatever reason. And this is the environment. It's a systemic thing. I don't know one thing that can be done to resolve this. There isn't just one thing. It's like you said, it's systemically. If you lock up one predator, there's still going to be however many other predators there are. What was it? You said pedophile. Yeah, pedophiles,
Yes.
predators, abusers abuse, and so that cycle continues, breaking the cycle with bringing in information, but then like you try to bring in information to an unaccepting group of people and they're like, nah, fuck that shit. I don't want to hear that shit. This is what my life is. This is who I am. This is what I do. So it's systemic. I mean, the only way I can see fit to really dismantle any type of system that enables this kind of behavior is by bringing information into it. Awareness alone doesn't do shit. I hate when people say raise awareness, bring awareness to, because it requires awareness and inspiring some kind of action. even if it's just like bringing in an accountability group or bringing the men in the community together. And this is again where I'm asking questions that I'm very hesitant to ask, but like I want to know what your father's involvement was because you never mentioned him the last time we talked, and then he came up twice since we started talking just now, and I'm like, where's he been this whole time?
Well, my parents divorced and remarried and then divorced again. So by the age of like 10, I want to say, um, he was out of the picture completely. We would visit every now and then, but not really much. But they divorced earlier when we were probably, you know what's funny now that I think about it, it was probably around the times that I was experiencing going through these things. The first time that they divorced was probably when I was around 6, somewhere around there. They remarried and weren't married long. Maybe I was maybe like 9-ish. And they didn't stay married long and divorced again. The first time that they divorced, we stayed at our house, and then they remarried. And the second time, we moved. Me and my brother, my mom and my brother. From that point, we visited my dad not very often. And then my mom remarried when I was 12. They've been married since.
At 12 was when your mom ended up with someone long term, and this was when I guess she just accepted this is who you are. I don't know. In terms of family, we can't say that it was a broken family necessarily because you spent a lot of time with other relatives, and it was actually a relative that got you involved with this. So we can't blame it on a broken, fatherless household. And then, even at 12, when there was a masculine presence in the home, that didn't change anything with your behavior. Again, it was just normal. This is just what you were programmed to do. This was what the normal was.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's exactly what it was. It was normal.
And people like to point the finger at a broken household, fatherless household, and I'm guilty of that too, for being like, well, we can blame it on there not being wholeness, I guess you would say, in a home, but that's not it. Is not. There was the secrecy. The secrecy was probably the most harmful thing here. The silence, the secrecy, the shame, because now, okay, well, this little thing is happening in your small group and it's being kept away from the people who can do something or know to do something, or they should be taking some type of action or being involved in your life to know that there's something going on. There are all of these dangling pieces that put together this bigger picture of it really just being the environment.
Yep, we slowly, gradually moved outside of the area that we were in. We moved from the inner city to kind of like the outskirts of the inner city. Then we moved to the southern parts of the city, and then we moved completely out of Kansas City altogether. And then we came back. So it's kind of like we were taken away from all of that for a brief moment, and then we came back. It didn't really shock me. I think around the time that we moved out of Kansas City, I was in high school. And honestly, that was when I was involved the most in volleyball. I started playing volleyball my freshman year of high school, the summer before my freshman year. And I was really involved in volleyball and I loved it. That also was when I mentioned this when we talked last time. There was a guy I liked and I sent him a picture. And my freshman year, he got that picture. And to this day, I can't say for sure what happened. If he sent it, if somebody else had his phone and saw it and sent it. But it ended up around the school. And of course, I've been doing this for a while. I've been talking to guys. I'm sending pictures. You know, that's normal behavior. But I've never been embarrassed like that. I've never had everybody see my stuff. Everybody that I got to see every day see these pictures. That may have caused me to, I don't know, spiral a little bit and want to revert back into that and get back into it to try to bury it maybe.
Was it like, well, people already think this about me, so I might as well act the part? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
So hold on, we skipped ahead a little bit. So we talked about the father, the family, the environment, all playing a role in the behavior, just being completely normalized. And you said if there was something that I wanted to ask you this too, but I think you cleared it up when you said the eliminating the secrecy. Is that the thing that you feel like would have put your life on a completely different path?
Yeah.
this was the most impactful thing, the unwillingness to talk about the dysfunction.
Not just dysfunction, things that should be normal, things that should be okay. I really think that if I was allowed to openly discuss with my mom sexuality, what sexuality is, all this different stuff, even if I was already experiencing this stuff with my cousin and she was already doing this stuff to me, it probably could have eliminated a lot of what happened after that point, because I could have had that discussion with my mom, and I'm like, could let her know that this has been happening, because I was able to openly discuss this stuff with her. When I was young, I'm sure we talked good touch, bad touch stuff. I'm sure we did that stuff. I learned about sex from my cousin. I learned about sex in sex ed. I learned about sex in middle school. I learned about sex when I was talking to these guys. I never had a conversation with her about sex and sex being okay. And a lot of that was surrounded by, in general, being viewed as a negative thing outside of marriage. Also, my mom was just very strict altogether. So when I say secrecy, I mean being open about dysfunction, but also being open about these other things that happen that should be considered normal, that we should be able to talk about because we do it, because these things occur and these things happen. I eliminating secrecy altogether and implementing openness and the ability to share. So it looks
I
like
try
I'm
to.
blowing your mind over here.
Well, that's the thing though. You're not blowing my mind. It's hearing it in such detail. Because like I said, I know this stuff happens, and I feel like maybe my response, my reaction at this point is just given that I'm in a position to be able to do something about it now, and I recognize it as being dysfunctional, not normal, and fucking illegal.
Right,
So now, it's I guess my brain's working. I do this thing, and I think it's just like a masculine thing where it's like, all right, how do I solve the problem? And so that's
right.
where like the hesitance is coming from, and the long pauses and everything like that. So I mean, without continuing to do that, that's something that's gonna happen once I'm legit able to do something. It's just a matter of figuring out what to do and who to bring it to.
And I don't think really that it's a thing that we can like just do like a focus group on, and then just send people out. I don't think that's something that can be done. I think it starts with the seed. It starts with one small group of people who have a different viewpoint, have experienced certain things and feel differently about what the people around them, what their environment is telling them to feel. They feel something differently altogether. We need to create an environment where those seeds can grow, that the process can continue to grow, and hopefully it spreads. That's the best that I can come up with myself. I don't think that we can just try to do something with a large group of people. I think it has to start with something genuinely changing and erupting somewhere. I think it has to start small, and it just has to grow, and it has to, other seeds have to be planted.
So it really just needs to start inside out. So we got another situation here where we're talking about this being an inside job. So where
Yes.
the survivors, so you for example, you're someone who has gone through this, you've started your healing process, you're in the healing process, you're seeing a therapist, you're talking to me about this so freely and openly right now. So it would be a matter of maybe you coming hey it'd be a matter of you maybe collaborating with other people of similar circumstances, or working with even parents, or just like community members in the neighborhood or something, and just getting together and be like, hey, listen, this happens, and this happens as a result of us doing exactly what we're doing, which is nothing, and saying
Right.
sex is for marriage. Okay, well, what about sex outside of marriage? What does that look like? What are some of these things that we're not supposed to go to the adults about? We're not supposed to talk about these things, but we need to know what it looks like. We don't even know what sex in marriage looks like. We don't have anything to strive for, and the only thing that we have are the experiences of the people who are at a place where they feel as if they can openly talk about this, where they're at a certain point in their healing process to where they can be lighthouses or be representation for the people who are in it and just don't know where to go, don't know that it's not normal, don't know that they have any sort of a safe space to open up and vent without fear of being reprimanded or judged or embarrassed or shamed or anything like that.
Yeah, most definitely. I I lost my train of thought that quick. I had something dealing with this one. I had something too. That fast. That is crazy. It'll come back to me.
That's all right. Well, we moved on to high school, and I think that just this would probably be a good place to start with that conversation. You were diagnosed with herpes in high school. You mentioned that you had anal sex with a male partner, and it you had the blisters, you had a rash, you felt like you tore your anus, and it ended up being genital herpes. The doctor diagnosed you, gave you some information and the medication. When you left, you told your mom, or you and your mom said that y'all just weren't going to talk about this. Now, this is
Right.
your second time going to get treated for an STI in 3 years, and it's just, we're not going to talk about it. That was the mindset around it.
Yeah, definitely. That was another secret, another thing in the closet that we're not that's there, but we're not gonna talk about. Yeah, and I'm already feeling like I've had sex, quote unquote, with the woman, with the female. I've had sex with multiple partners. Had an STI already. I got my picture sent around the school. A picture of my boobs sent around my high school. I feel like trash at this point. Wait, then there's this little beacon of light. I got a boyfriend. I got somebody I think that really likes me. You know, he's taking me to dances, all this stuff. You know, he wants to show me around, and I get herpes. He gives me herpes. After giving me herpes, he decides that we don't need to continue to be together after that. I was okay with being together. I'm like, okay, you know, it hurt my feelings. Why, you know, maybe he didn't know. And I told you before that looking back at it, he played stupid like he didn't know what it was. And it was just like, did it come from us doing what we did, talking about the anal sex and all that? But that turned out to be nothing. It was an immediate rejection from the person who gave it to me. And I went back into feeling like crap, feeling like nothing. The only thing I think at this time I had going for me was volleyball. That's the only thing I think I had going for me at this time. And then because I got that, I started reverting back into the behaviors that I had been, meeting up with these guys, skipping school, all that stuff. And you just love talking too. You just like your mama, love talking. I started doing all this stuff again. I got caught. The result was me losing the privilege to play volleyball. So my junior year, I also was switched to a different school because of, you know, what was going on. And we were moving. I was told that it was just because we were moving, but I'm sure looking back, it was because of what was going on.
The picture, you mean, right?
That resulted in my sophomore year, somebody tried to revamp it and sent out a picture mimicking the picture that I had taken and was like, y'all remember this? Like, basically trying to bring it back to the light. And I ended up in a fight. We ended up suspended. We thought it was resolved after that. We hated each other from that point on, but it was supposed to be over and done with. And then, you know, actually what I think what the reason was, we had a merger of schools with our school and went downhill. So that was a part of the reason for the transfer. I'm sorry.
No worries. We good. So coming from having to transfer schools, just given the circumstances of the picture that was circulating around school, we're talking about the time frame where this person who liked you, they took you out and did all this stuff with you, and then you get diagnosed with herpes, and now this person doesn't want anything to do with you anymore. So at this time, we're 15 years old, so we're talking sophomore, junior year. How was going through high school with genital herpes for you? As far as I've connected with, you're the youngest person I know who ended up with a positive herpes diagnosis. I wouldn't even know where to begin navigating this in high school after already having been sexually active.
Once my outbreak was gone, I pretended like it didn't happen. So I said the last time we talked about it, I was kind of operating on autopilot, you know, and I just was kind of going through the motions and pretending like everything was normal and, you know, continuing to go on about it. Normal, quote unquote, life. To be quite honest, looking back on everything, I probably was suffering from a lot of emotional problems, probably had a depression and all kind of stuff, and I really didn't even realize it. Just thinking about it, I probably did have a lot of internalized emotional issues with it that I really didn't express in a healthy way, and I ended up turning around and engaging in a lot of sexual activity again to try to, I guess, bury it all and pretend like it's still just not happening. And I'm not disclosing at this point.
Because we're pretending it didn't happen.
Right. All that. That's pretty much how I navigated through it. There's
And
nothing more to that.
and even then, did you have anyone tell you, okay, you have an STI now and you're sexually active, you have to disclose this information?
No. No,
Nothing.
I don't. And I'm laughing because I remember a couple of years ago going to my mom, because she's the only person that knows. She, me, and him. We're the only three that know about this. I remember going to my mom and like wondering if she was just so disappointed in me because I continued to have sex and all this. And she told me that she thought I was disclosing. Now, just thinking about it, I'm like, how did you expect? I didn't even know how to deal with this shit. How are you expecting me to even be thinking about the person who gave it to me didn't even disclose to me? Like the patterns that I'm seeing laid out in front of me. How could you have expected that from me?
And was there any guilt at all? Or was there any shame around
Yeah,
not disclosing?
def- definitely, definitely. There was a lot of guilt. Switch schools, move schools. I don't know if that had anything to do with it or not. But my junior year, I skipped school probably my whole second semester while there. Meeting up with, there were two guys in particular that I can remember that I would meet up with, older guys. One of them was another 40 something. They was spending money on me at this time. I remember coming home with gifts and getting in trouble. And my daddy took my gifts and did stuff like my mama told my daddy, and took the stuff that I was getting and like I don't know what he did with it, threw them away or something. I get to the new school and skip school that whole second semester. Senior year, I started getting involved, but I wasn't really dealing with guys at this point. There was one guy that I ended up liking, and I started getting involved with him. Like he never penetrated me. We didn't have sex like that. That resulted in oral sex. I was giving him fellatio majority of the time. Another me being a little impressionable, thinking this guy liked me. And that was pretty much. Actually, the guilt really probably didn't set in for real until I moved on to college. When I went to college, I was aware of what was going on with me. And go
Question.
ahead.
When you went
Yes.
off to college, did you go away from home? Were you away from
Mm-hmm.
your environment? Okay.
Yes. Yes. And I went a little crazy. I started smoking weed and
You didn't smoke weed or drink before? Another wild assumption out there that, oh, it's because of drugs, it's because of alcohol, and that they're doing all this stuff. And that wasn't even the case with you.
no, no.
This is just you representing a community, an environment, I'm sorry. And there was no drugs, there was no alcohol. This is just normal without that, like even being involved. And you
Yeah.
get to college, and now you're experimenting with drugs, and now you're drinking, and now you're
And
beginning to challenge that, the norm.
yeah. Funny thing is, of course, people were assuming. My mom, in particular, was assuming that I was already smoking weed and doing drugs, but I wasn't. While I was in high school, but I wasn't.
Well, maybe if she talked to you, she would have known that.
Right. Maybe. Yeah. So I get to college and I get into drugs. I get to partying, doing all this stuff. I'm letting loose my inhibitions. I'm getting attention. And of course, it's starting to come to me like, I'm getting all this attention, and guys are talking to me. They're, asking, if I want to move forward, have sex, all this stuff. And I had sex with a couple guys and didn't let them know. And it was haunting me after that. I done did this with these guys, and I did not tell them. Nobody has come. I know I was having protected sex with most of them, but I didn't know for sure if I was uneducated completely about how somebody could contract it. For the longest, I was thinking it was through fluids, and I didn't know, if it was coming from, if I had to have an outbreak in order to give it to somebody. I didn't know. I didn't have any real knowledge about living with it. I didn't know. college my freshman year. Second semester my freshman year, I drop out. Start living a life on my own. I was dealing with a guy back home who was a friend of the family, quote unquote, who would come and see me, and I would go home and see him. We were doing this thing. It wasn't a relationship, but it was a thing, and I wasn't letting him know. And that was one of the things that was really getting to me. I didn't discuss this with you, but I remember I came home that summer, and he would take me out. I was under the age of 21, so I wasn't legally allowed to go into clubs and stuff like that, but he would take me out. And I remember one night he took me out with him and his cousin. Him and his cousin took me out together. I was under the impression that the cousin was gonna pick up some girl, or that he was gonna do his own thing. We went and got a room, and we all three ended up in a room together. So that went down, and from that point, I decided I was just not gonna tell him. I was just like, fuck it, y'all did that to me. I'm not telling y'all shit.
I have to ask you this. Is this an assault? Was this coerced? Was there any kind of conversation at all around this about consent? This was
No,
just normal. This was expected.
I didn't get down like that. I wasn't having threesomes with people and all that. I was promiscuous. I was having sex. I was having a lot of sex, but it wasn't assault. It was an assault. It wasn't something that I wanted to do.
Okay.
But there's no but to it. In my head, I felt like I deserved it because I wasn't disclosing. I ended up pregnant later on by him and lost the baby. And I kind of slowed down from that point. And then I ended up in a relationship with my daughter's father. Well, I met him and we were kind of on and off for a while. I ended up in a relationship, and our situation transpired from that point.
You have a child. How old is she?
She's 9 months.
9 months, and so active and vocal and talking. You didn't have any issues with herpes and having your child, did you?
I did not.
Good. People think that if you have genital herpes, you have to have a C-section, or you can't have a baby without the baby contracting herpes. I don't know. Did they test your baby for HSV after birth?
They did, and she's negative for it.
Okay.
I did not give birth to her vaginally. I ended up having to have a C-section, but it had nothing to do with having HSV. I was diagnosed with preeclampsia in my 36th week of pregnancy, which is high blood pressure, dangerously high blood pressure, to the point where they were anticipating me having a stroke or a seizure. So they had me on medication for 48 hours and tried to induce me, and I wouldn't dilate. So they gave me the option to do a C-section, and I was worried about her being okay. So I decided to get a C-section.
How are you right now?
I'm taking everything day by day, honestly. I feel like I'm in a much healthier space than I ever have been. Probably since I was a little kid running around with no worries in the world.
I don't know. I feel like you became an adult pretty early.
I know, right?
Hey, I don't even think you had time to really run around.
6 years. But I'm talking to a guy. He knows. I've been really adamant for the past couple years about disclosing to people. He knows. He's pretty accepting of it. I don't know where it's gonna go. I'm honestly not really worried about a relationship. I'm really worried about just being healthy emotionally, mentally, physically healthy, making sure this little baby girl over here, this this siren is healthy, creating an environment for her to.
She off to a great start. She already got her podcast debut at 9 months.
Okay.
You also mentioned on the last one, we didn't get to cover this, but we talked about how you really haven't been sexually active, I guess, since your daughter was conceived. So from that period on, were you just not turned on? What was it?
Oh no. I've been turned on. It gets hard, but I know it would probably baffle a lot of people to hear this, but in my mind and in my eyes, probably the most traumatic experience that I've ever experienced with my daughter's father. And it shook me to a point to where it's hard for me to really trust, which everything else, but it's hard for me to really trust guys. Not even trust guys, but trust myself in a relationship.
We're talking about the father of your child who's running around right now. At 25 years old, after everything you've been through, the most traumatic event of all of this, in your perspective, in seeing therapy and going through the healing process, was the relationship with the father of your child?
Yeah. Yes. He was very before becoming physically abusive, he was very emotionally abusive, very manipulative. I actually talked about this to you a while when we first started talking about it, but I didn't even find out until later on. He made me doubt my own sanity. That's the type of situation I had with him. He made me doubt my reality being in a relationship with him. He was very controlling, and we talked about this too, but I'm gonna say it. I'm convinced that the man trapped me. I ain't even gonna lie. That he got me pregnant on purpose. I'm not even gonna lie. I'm convinced because the timing of everything just lined up too well. We lived around the corner from each other. I was in a position where I was moving and I was about to start another life. And then after years of us dealing with each other, I pop up pregnant. And, we never had this problem prior. We never, had to deal with that prior. But while I was pregnant, he physically assaulted me. I went to his house upset, horny, and upset because he was ignoring me. I'm a pregnant woman who's hormonal, and I'm horny, and you're ignoring me. So I went over to his house, and we were arguing. And as I'm trying to leave after we argued, he he first grabbed me by my hair and was like yanking me by my hair into the house. For what reason, I don't know. Prior to this, escorted me off of his property. I snatched my arm from him and told him I didn't need to escort me. It turned into him trying to pull me into the house by my hair and then flip me around some kind of way and put me in a headlock and was trying to drag me in the house in a headlock. I slipped out of it. I don't know if he loosened his grip or what, but I had my phone in my hand and I had Siri. I was like, asking Siri to call my mom. And he realized what I was doing, and I think he tried to get my phone and maybe loosened his grip while trying to get my phone, and I was able to slip from underneath his arm. And I was running up the street. I slipped out of everything. I had my glasses on, and I had on slides, and I ran out of my shoes, and didn't have my glasses. I couldn't see nothing. It was the middle of the night. The only reason I was able to leave that day was because the neighbors were sitting outside in the truck and they see me running. And so he came out, like his house is the last house on the block. And at night you can't see shit. You can't see anything. So he came out and he was throwing my stuff in the street and threw my glasses in front of me. I'm yelling down the street like, "Can I leave? Can I leave? You gonna let me leave?" And he threw all my stuff out but my phone. And he wouldn't give me my phone, and he was like threatening to. He was running in the house. I was assuming to go get his gun because he owns a gun.
Can you repeat that last part?
Yeah, he went in the house and was like threatening, like if I don't leave, type of stuff. And I was assuming that he was going to get his gun. He had a gun. He owned a gun, and I knew he owned a gun. And I was assuming that he was going in the house to go get his gun. So I was asking him to give me my phone back, but because he was threatening or making it seem like he was threatening to shoot me, I just left. I pulled off and left. I ended up getting my phone back later on, but that was the experience I had with him. Initially, he ended up stalking me. When I moved in with my mom, he didn't know where I was. I assumed he didn't know where I was, but he found me, and he was pulling up to my mama's house and threatening me and my mom's. All while I was pregnant. So yeah, that was my experience with my daughter's father. So it was really hard for me to even want to have relations with anybody and be with anybody
Yeah.
after an experience like that.
So after so much male attention, or I don't know what we would call it. I guess these were a form of relationships. After so many sexual encounters, I guess, with various people, nothing hurt you more than letting your guard down, trusting someone. I'm sure you loved him at some point, and you allowed him in, you gave him power to hurt you more than you've given anyone else power to do so.
Yeah, definitely,
Okay.
definitely. He knew it too. He knew it. I let him in a way. He had me in a way that nobody ever had me, ever.
What was different about this relationship?
I was extremely open and extremely honest. What drew me to him was what I thought was brutal honesty in the beginning from him on his end. I told you he was very manipulative and all that, and he would say things to me that would seem like it was constructive criticism or him calling me out on stuff, and I appreciated it because I felt like nobody had done that for me before. Nobody was ever honest enough to be like, hey, you ain't right. That's how I felt about it. So that was what really drew me in and allowed me to be very open with him and let me in. And now I don't care who knows anything. I don't care. I don't care if you know anything. I'm open to sharing my whole life. I would write a book if I could.
You can do anything. You can do anything you want to. And I don't even know how to end this. Oh, thank you more than anything. Just thank you. Thank you for telling us that, for telling us everything. I mean, I know it may not have gone in like the smooth flow. It was definitely better than the first time we tried this. And even some other stuff came up. I know we left out some things that may have not even really been relevant. So I thank you. And hopefully this is some sort of a catalyst to create some sort of change, man, because clearly there's a disconnect between the people who believe abstinence sex ed helps, and we're looking at the damage that's being done. That shit doesn't work in certain environments. In fact, that type of belief, that behavior, the education there is what's perpetuating this secrecy, because it's like, don't have sex till you're married. All right, well, what about everything that leads up to that? What happens after you're married? What about the stuff that we haven't yet talked about? All right, so that episode ended abruptly because we got cut off. We were disconnected, which this never happens before. So I'm thinking maybe Z's phone might have died. But we concluded the episode. That was the end of it. And I thank you for taking care of yourself. I thank you for taking the time to listen to this podcast episode. Like I said, it's important. The secrecy, the shame, and all of that really contributes to this. And for people who think that STI diagnoses or sexual trauma doesn't look different for marginalized groups, you I'm hoping that you really listen to this episode, because this is a real experience. This stuff happens. This stuff is going on even as we speak, and there's no one calling it out. There's no one who's in it who sees this as a problem. It's just normal to some people. And I don't have the answer to what we can do. I have an answer, a answer. I have an answer for what can be done, and that's really, we got to break these cycles. We got to break these generational cycles, and it starts with us. When we recognize dysfunction, we cannot allow ourselves to just continue to normalize it. And this branches out way further than just being about herpes or just being about sex. Like, we're talking about complete dysfunction and people being a product of their environment. So once we're at a space of being able to realize that for ourselves, especially being in these communities, like, it becomes an inside out job. It becomes an inside job, and we work our way, we work ourselves outward, by calling out the dysfunction, by being a safe space for people to also share their experiences, and being willing and able to hold people accountable. There's no reason that some of the experiences that Z's shared in this podcast episode should be going on. There's none, especially now where we have so much access to information. We can get the truth behind things. We've got the internet. We've got instant access to information and education and resources. So silencing and saying we're not going to talk about it in this house, those kinds of things are completely shutting us off from being able to heal, from being able to uh, end the cycles of dysfunction that occur in certain environments, in certain communities, and even in households. So I hope that this opens your mind or encourages you to share with someone who may be perpetuating this kind of mindset because it's damaging. It does far more damage than it does good. And honestly, I can't even think of a situation where it does do any good. Till next time, stay sex positive.